Hi, do you ever wonder how to capture the beauty of the sky outside? I know that many of you, when you first started painting, the first thing you would have said is, oh, I can see raw umber or burnt umber or sienna in the sky, because most of us start noticing the cloud colours as soon as we start painting. But how do you capture clouds? Well, you could spend hours studying them. You can paint just clouds. There's lots of people on YouTube who feature clouds in their landscapes. It's more about the cloud than it is about the landscape. But how do you capture a simple watercolour sky? Well, today we're going to look at just a few colours I can suggest you use to get you started. There's no right or wrong colours. If you want to put a colour in, try it. But I'll show you a couple of techniques, ways to make skies look a little bit more realistic and a bit less forced. And the best thing I can advise you to do is to practice lots of sky studies, and whichever ones you like, take forward and develop into paintings. So let's get into it. I'm going to paint the sky. Which colours should you choose? Well, assuming that your sky has got very few clouds in it and you want it to be blue, you might want to think about having a warm blue, which is near a red on the colour wheel, at the top, which is what you would see coming over your head if you were the viewer in your picture. Whereas the cooler blues going round this way towards the yellow are going to be a bluey green, and because they're cooler, they're closer to yellow than they are to red, they give the appearance of distance in skies. They're quite useful. So for my warm blue, I've gone for ultramarine, which is almost a violety blue. I'm just going to give my paper a light spray just to help it move, and just pop on some ultramarine blue across the top here, maybe leaving just a few clouds showing. Let's see how we go. So ultramarine is almost violet in its colour. It's closer to red than it is to yellow. Then we might drop into something in the middle, which is perhaps a cobalt blue, a mid blue, which is neither violet or greeny. There are lots of blues around. These are just the ones I'm suggesting you use, but you can use whatever you have in your palette. And then finally, this is very obviously a bluey green, which is so much cooler than the one we started off with, ultramarine, that it gives the illusion that the sky down here is further away than the sky at the top. It is only an illusion. We are just pretending that a flat piece of paper can act as a sky. If you're not happy about some of the bits with the clouds, etc., of course you can go back into them while it's still wet, soften some of them away, maybe add a little bit more blue in there at the top, and then give it a chance to run down, let those colours blend a little bit more. This is just very rough, I'm not doing anything in particular here. Just use your brush to take off some of these puddles that are formed, but maybe leave some of the cloud shapes behind. And then you start to see the difference between this and this area. Some people like to have the background, so maybe the very distant horizon, a violet. So I'm just pulling in a tiny bit of violet paint into my ultramarine blue, which is already a violet, in the sense it's a warm blue, and I'm just going to pop that along the bottom there, suggesting that the horizon here is cool and in the distance. So it's the opposite to the sky, because the horizon, this blue violet, is going to be an awful lot cooler and therefore appears further away than any colours we may have in the foreground. And just for ease, we're going to have some green, because that's what you'd normally see right in the foreground in a landscape, some green somewhere. So the green, which is more colourful and in the foreground, is warmer than the violet. So I'll just add a little bit of yellow into that. We've got some blooms happening here. Blooms are quite nice when they do that, because they appear to make trees or shrubs or all sorts of things in the distance there. So as it's drying, I'm just dropping in some slightly thicker paint and trying to pop a bit of the blue in as well. We get a few runbacks to suggest some foliage in the foreground. These look like trees blowing away in the wind. So that's just hopefully helped you when you're looking at blues in your sky. Have warm blues at the top. Warm blues are nearest the red, and have cool blues towards the horizon, and cool blues are nearest the yellow. Having a look at another sky now, very similar theme, but let's say for instance you want your sky to be a bit greyer, more UK based, or maybe your part of the world isn't bright sunshine and bright blue sky. So you're trying to get this greyed soft look that gives you the impression of a sky. Now these clouds are pretty basic, I haven't really spent much time on them, but you can see how the colours have greyed down on the paper and mixed into this lovely soft grey, and so it still gives a little bit of an arc, but then down here it's very, very grey and very, very soft. So how can you make your colours grey? It's not difficult, you just have to have a little bit of a thought process about how you make grey. So here's our base colours. Let's pick similar colours to what we had before. So I've got ultramarine blue, which is our warm violet blue. Nice thin wash of that. Then I'll go in for some mid blue, which is the cobalt, a little bit stronger there, isn't it? So that could do with being watered down a little bit, but still a nice blue. Then we could go down the cerulean route, which we did before, and so you've got a similar idea to how we did it before. But sometimes just adding a touch of something else, let's add a tiny touch of crimson into this area, we can create a lovely, very soft violet. Now the pink has gone into a greeny blue. Pink is red and greeny blue has got the green touch in it, and they're opposites on the colour wheel. So that pink has made that blue grey down to a nice soft, very grey pink. Hope that makes sense. Let's try another one. So going back to my ultramarine blue, again a nice thin wash, try not to make it too strong this time. This is just the back of a piece of practice paper. Now touch of that cobalt, but maybe with a touch more water, the mid blue. Then yet again touch of cerulean, but this time over on my palette here, just out of your view, is raw sienna. So let's pop that on the bottom here on the page, and not quite right, is it? You've got like a warm yellow mixing into the blue. If we mix a little bit of that raw sienna into a little bit of cerulean blue here on the palette, sort of going to get almost like a duck egg blue, little bluey green going on there. Let's put that over the bottom of it. So there's a greeny finish, which is again a greyed down green. And yeah, you probably found already when you're painting skies, sometimes they go green, but actually in nature, skies quite often have a bit of green in them. So that hasn't quite worked because this separate area here, so I'm just going to merge that back in. So it's completely the same effect, as in we're greying down the blue at the bottom, but instead of pink we've got a slightly greeny blue tinge going on there. Now if I take the raw sienna and this time add it to the ultramarine blue, which is a different blue. So let's see what colour we get then. Now that is definitely a grey. So you can see how important it is for you to pick up different blues, different pinks, different yellows, and just see what they do when you put them on the paper. Now just pulling up some more stronger blue into this one. So there we go, the raw sienna and the ultramarine blue made a really, really nice grey. Which you could say that the cerulean and the raw sienna made a very greeny grey, which could work for your picture. But if you want a subdued grey, this one is better. The cobalt could be quite similar. Let's just have a little look at the cobalt. So let's pop that in here. A little bit strong, so just get a little bit more water in there. What happens if we add raw sienna to the cobalt? Cobalt is already going into a greyer colour, but it's much stronger blue, but it has greyed down nicely. I'm making a mess here, I'm transferring one way and then the other, but that's fine. I just need a little bit of paper to use for this one. So yeah, that's a lovely grey, look at that, hope you can see that. So yes, I'd happily use that grey in my sky. So when you're trying to create skies, think about greying your colours down. Try adding one colour to another. Now raw sienna is basically a yellow, but it's got that warm tinge, so it's all sort of a yellow orange, isn't it? And if you add a yellow or an orange to a blue, different blues do different things, they grey each other down. So if I added a lemon yellow to the blue, of course I'd get bright green, which is not what I want at all. So let me just show you that. I should get you some cobalt again, which is over here. So instead of using the raw sienna, I'm going to pick up some lemon yellow, which is more towards the green, isn't it? It's not warm like this one over here. This one is towards the red, it's quite orangey. This one definitely is nowhere near red. So if we add that to the blue, whoa, we get a super duper green, which is not going to work in the sky, but could work quite nicely for the hills. So let's give this a go. I've got my three colours. I've got ultramarine blue, cerulean blue, and some raw sienna for this particular one. Going to pick up the ultramarine and pop it along the top areas of the sky. Just need to grab some more, so give it a, I'm not really trying to do anything particularly here. Sometimes the skies paint themselves. The more sketches of skies you can introduce into your practice, the more likely you are to find some nice skies that work for you. So let me just pop a tube of paint underneath here, just to give it a little bit of a tilt down. Now going for my cerulean and just trying to leave some little gaps just to suggest something going on the clouds here. Obviously your paper will give you some choices as well. Then I'm going to pick up my raw sienna, pull it across to my ultramarine blue that I had earlier, and that's now greyed that down beautifully, and then keep going with that. See if that's going to create the effect I want. It's quite warm in here, so I'm dried out over here. Let's just quickly pop that back in, some grey there. It's up to you what colours you put in the sky. This is just a few little ideas from me for you to try. I've now got to the bottom of the sky. I just fancy adding a little bit of crimson to that grey, and just pop that in there and leave a few little gaps for small clouds. Maybe just wash that out a little bit. For the purposes of this, I'm taking the sky right down to the bottom of the page. If I like the sky, I can come back later and add a view onto it. That's working quite nicely. Got some interesting patterns going on. It's doing its own thing. Could you go back in and add some cloud shapes? You absolutely can. It's whether or not you want to. So I would generally stick to the same colours I've had before. So I can get that raw sienna, and then I'm going to pick up some of that ultramarine blue, because I know that makes a nice grey. Do I want it a little bit warmer? Just drag in the raw sienna so it's warmish grey now. And then if this is still damp, you can go in and just tickle. Ooh, that's quite strong, isn't it? So you do have to keep an eye on how much paint is in that brush. So let's just take that out. Use that, trying to just suggest the base of some clouds. But as you just saw there, you can easily overdo this bit. So if it's not really working, don't worry about it, just leave it. But it's going to do this whilst it is still quite wet on the paper. You don't want to do this when it's drying, because it just does not look right with hard edges. Just dance that back in there. Let's just put some more suggestions here. Pull in a bit of the cerulean now, changing that grey colour. It's slightly going to stand out against the ones that we had on there before because they're thinner and they're settling. This is just dropped in whilst we've still got the paint open, as in the paint is still on damp paper, it's not dried off. That's probably all I need. I could tilt it, see if I get some effects coming out of there, and sometimes all you just get is a bead, you can see going down there, which could leave some blooms in a sky, which I might not want, so I could potentially take those off with a thirsty brush, and that just means a brush that's been washed out and then squeezed dry or just slightly dabbed on the towel. So you don't want a bone dry brush. Just work into some of those shadows, just break up those edges. Get the idea. It's very subtle. I know this probably isn't going to show up that well for you because it's an extremely subtle sky, but remember, when you're painting a sky, the sky isn't the main thing unless you're just painting skies. The sky is the backdrop to something else that's going on in your picture. So do remember to keep your sky loose and soft, and generally a greyed down colour will work quite well. Just another little tip, as you've got all this on, and this is a test piece, so I'm not too worried what happens. But the towel again, if you just roll up a towel lightly like that, just gently, literally walk it over, don't push down, can lift off some little highlights and shapes for you without you doing too much. So I've got a few come off there, let's just go over once more. I think it's probably reached its point where it's stopped. So there we go. Let that settle, and that's a very simple sky. We had raw sienna, cerulean blue, ultramarine blue, and a tiny touch of crimson at the bottom. So you can go back in and work on that. Going back to this one, you can see I've already gone back in with a distant horizon line of a greyed down violet, and then as I move forward I've warmed up the colours, so we're getting to warmer greens in the foreground. That's probably all I would do with this picture, but there's nothing to stop you throwing in some more colour if you want. That bright green I used earlier can be used to pop on some little marks and dots and dashes just to suggest something going on in the foreground. Who knows what it is, but you can just layer up a little bit. Remember, every time you layer with paint like this, you're not brightening it, you're dulling it down, because every layer of paint is blocking more and more light. So keep it simple. Take some off as much as you put some on, Maybe just have a harder line there, who knows, just something like that. You can start to develop a bit of depth in the foreground, and depending on what you want your picture to be about, you could have all sorts of details, fences and paths and all sorts of things, or you can just leave it as a simple picture of the sky. So I would do exactly the same to this when it's dry, and create some sort of picture. I hope that helped everybody. It's only just a little taster of skies. I mean, you can spend a long time painting skies, and that might become your forte, that you could end up being the expert on painting skies, and everybody will come to you for advice. It's what you see in the clouds and in the sky that you need to put into your painting. Remember, skies don't have to be exactly what you see, but sometimes the simple things like greying colours down by adding opposites or close opposites on the colour wheel can make the sky look more natural whilst you focus on something in the foreground or in the landscape. But feel free to experiment. If you find a nice colour combination, please drop it in the comments so other people can try it too. Thank you so much for watching. Take care, and I'll see you on the next video. Bye for now. Happy painting.